Welcome to the Taking the Leap podcast, where you can learn how to launch your full-time career in this part-time gig economy. No matter what career you're in, you have the potential to be the best version of you and overcome whatever obstacles stand in your way. And now, here's your host, the CEO of Bonvera, Bob Dickey.
This morning, I have the distinct honor of interviewing two really close friends of mine, business partners and associates, Raquel and Mark Williams from Napa, California. Both of them have really interesting backgrounds. And I'm really looking forward to this interview and this podcast because I think we're going to tease out a lot of really interesting things for entrepreneurs who are on their journey and folks who are taking the leap. You know, we had the opportunity last night to speak with you guys. We had a great steak dinner here in Wichita, Kansas. And we just had a wonderful time. I think we closed down the restaurant. But, you know, Raquel, just to give a little bit of background, on you've been a serial entrepreneur in your life. You're just a phenomenal speaker, teacher, mentor. You've had a really diverse entrepreneurial background, successes in a whole host of different areas. I want to talk about some of them. I mean, everything from singer-songwriter early in your career to top saleswoman for the hair club for men, if I'm not mistaken. So the number in Los Angeles, California, you sold hair to bald guys, and I want to talk a little bit about that. And of course, you're doing some great things right now, not only with Bonvera, but also with a startup ice cream company in the Bay Area that seems to be doing some groundbreaking things. And then, of course, your husband, Mark. I absolutely love speaking with you, Mark. I mean, you're kind of a guy after my own heart. I mean, not only you have public service is in your DNA. A police officer for the city of San Francisco, been on the SWAT team, a detective, just really cool stories and things that you've learned in your career in the criminal justice system, serving and protecting people in the city of San Francisco. One of my favorite experiences is driving with you because I guess you know everybody. I remember one time you and I were, you were going to give me a ride to the airport, and we were in Napa. It was super early in the morning, and I was afraid I was going to miss my flight back to the East Coast. And you're like, "Don't worry, Bob, I got this." And you drove like the wind. I mean, it was like, and nobody pulled you over. We got there to the airport on time. I was like, "This is awesome. I got to have a police officer give me an escort whenever I travel." But it's awesome to have both of you guys here, and I know that our listeners are going to learn a lot from you both. So, Raquel, let's start with you. I'd like to tell me a little bit about your journey. You're a serial entrepreneur. And one of the things that I really appreciate about you is that anytime we start talking, you dive into the mindset of a person, the mindset and the mental attitude and why that is so important to be successful in life. When did you discover that, and how do you refine that? I mean, tell me a little bit about your journey and the power of mindset for you.
Wow. Okay. So very early on, I ended up not living with my parents, and I went to live with my sister. Mm-hmm. And that caused me to have to grow up very quickly. And, I was working by the age of 13 years old and learned by 16, I was pretty much signing for myself, taking care of myself. So very early on, independence was something I had to adopt. Mm-hmm. So in terms of mindset, I guess for me, when challenges arise in my life, I was always the kind of person, even as a child, that I needed to figure out how to get out of it. I was not the kind of girl that stayed stuck in a situation. Mm-hmm. I didn't like it. I didn't like how it felt. So I very quickly was like, okay, so what do I need to do now? I kind of always had that as a child. And going into my early adult years, I got married very young, and by the time I was 26, I was getting a divorce, but I was a mom, mm-hmm. and I had a young son, and I worked for a company in Los Angeles where I was already managing a staffing agency. But as an employee, I felt the restrictions of being a single mom now and having to be there at a certain time and having to stay until a certain time.
The 9 to 5 being tied down and being very restrictive.
Yes. And I guess it was okay when I was married and we were sharing a lot of the responsibilities. Mm-hmm. But when I became a single mom, I very quickly learned that it wasn't going to work for me. I felt like daycare was raising my son and I had no time. And I I was watching another division in our office, which was full-time commission. And these girls kind of came in and out as they wanted. They had their own schedules. They weren't punching the clock. They didn't have to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning. And
freedom and flexibility.
Yeah. And at that point, I didn't really know a lot about entrepreneurialism, but in my mind, I'm like, well, how do I get that freedom? How do I not have to punch a clock and they're making more money than I am? Mm-hmm. How can I make more money and not have to be here at an exact time for 8, 9, 10 hours a day? Because I'm a mom and I'm a single mom now. So how do I make this work? So I remember going over to my boss and saying, I want to look at doing that. Mm-hmm. I want that position over there. And they very quickly suggested against it. They didn't think it was a good idea for me.
Really? Why?
Because I was a single mom and it was 100% commission. And if I didn't produce, there was no money. Mm. So they looked at me and said, Raquel, we really don't think that's for you. Why don't you sleep on it? I said, okay. So I did. Next morning, I walked right back into the office and I said, okay, I want to talk to you. And they said, okay. And they're thinking I'm going to agree with them and say, you know what, you're right. It's probably not a good idea.
Safety and security is more important.
Yeah. And I looked at them and said, all right, let's do it. And they both, my boss and the manager, looked at me and they said, are you sure? I said, yeah. And they said, okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we do a trial basis? Mm-hmm. And I said, and they said, why don't we give you, a certain base mm-hmm. and then a certain commission, and then you can work your way. And I was kind of doing the numbers in my head, and I thought, well, I got to give you 60% of what I produce. You're only going to give me 30%. Yeah, but we're giving you a base. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. And they're looking at me like I'm crazy. Yeah. And they're like, Raquel, and I said, no, just let me do it.
Yeah.
So they said, okay. All right. And they let me do it. And so I found myself in this 100% commission position and I had to produce.
Right.
And so I went to my boss and I said, you have done this job before. And he said, yeah. And I said, I need you to tell me exactly what I need to do.
Ooh, that was a great insight.
So he looked at me and I think he thought this was going to turn me off. Mm-hmm. And he said, you're going to have to make at least 100 calls a day. And you're going to have to do it every day.
What were the calls? This was a staffing agency, so you were trying to place employees for maybe different companies within Los Angeles. Is that it? Okay.
This was a boutique firm in Los Angeles. We dealt with all high-end clientele in entertainment, investment banking, those sorts of clients. And yeah, so he says, well, if you're going to... So essentially, I had to go build my own clientele.
You're cold calling. 100 clients a day. Hey, we've got a service for you, or how can we help you? Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
And I've never done it before.
You've got some guts, girl.
So I was determined because I felt lost at that point. Like, I couldn't be a mom. I felt like I couldn't go when my son had a show at school. Mm-hmm. I was made to feel like I had to be there or I risked my job. Mm-hmm. And the pressure was a lot for me. And I rather have the other pressure because I always felt like, let me go do what I think I can do. Don't tell me what you think I can do. Yeah. And so I locked myself in this office. I pulled out the book of lists. I started making phone calls. I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah. No idea. I got more people hanging up on me saying no, didn't even let me get my spiel out. Mm-hmm. I'd start halfway in. Yeah, no thanks. Don't click. Mm-hmm. And 100 calls are a lot.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize until you actually start doing it. And so I started to get myself into a rhythm. And I just would call and call and call and call and call and call and call. I didn't even take a break for lunch. Like, I didn't come out of that office. For at least the first 4 days, I got no results. Mm-hmm. Now you can imagine what my mind was doing at this point.
Well, tell me what you're thinking.
I started having all the doubt. I started feeling like
the wrong decision.
Yep. I started feeling like maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe they were right. I remember walking out to the restroom and two of my good friends in the office stopped me. And they looked at me and they were like, and they really cared about me. And I know they do. And I love them dearly. But they looked at me like, what are you doing? You know, Raquel, what are you doing? Like, you don't have to prove anything to anybody. And I remember my heart just sank because when you're doing everything that you know to do and you take that leap of faith and you just go for it, but it doesn't appear to be working, then that's when all the doubt will set in and start telling you, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe they were right. Maybe they knew something I didn't know. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe all that starts happening. And I looked at my friends and I just shook my head. I'm like, I'm okay. And I walk right back into that office. On day 4, I'm going through my 100 calls. I don't know what number it was, but I called an entertainment firm. And she answers the phone and I go through my spiel. Hi, you know, my name is Raquel and I'm just introducing myself. I'm a brand new recruiter in the area. And I just kind of made up my own little pitch. And this lady on the other end says, oh, wow, what great timing. And I remember I just kind of fell back in my seat and I was like, yeah? And she says, yeah, I actually need a couple of people right now. And can you come right now? And I said, I will be right there. And I got her information. I hung up, I grabbed my bag, I grabbed my stuff, and I start running out of the office. And I see my boss look at me. I'm like, I got one.
Wow. Tell me about that feeling. It's interesting as I'm watching you talk about this experience. I mean, this is what, 20, 25 years ago?
Yep.
You walked in here, sat down, we're having a conversation. I can visibly see you like get emotional thinking about this like very pivotal moment in your journey. I can see the emotion in your face. I mean, it's almost as if like you're reliving it it was just like yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I can totally still feel the emotion because I called and called and called, and I can honestly tell you I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew I couldn't quit.
Yeah.
So when I got the yes, I ran. And, you know, I got in front of her, we started talking, and I think I got like 2 orders from her that day. And not only did I get the orders, see, in our office, you would get an order, you open it up to the office, and if you landed the account, anybody else could fill it and you split it. Or you double end the deal and you land the account and you fill the account. I did both on that one.
Wow.
So in my first year, I ended up making almost $100,000. And I was a baby recruiter, and this was 20 years ago. That was really good money.
So that was a lot more than what you were making previously.
Oh, yeah. And I learned a valuable lesson because that one yes, after making over 400 calls, led me to a whole different career. And it also taught me a very valuable lesson about what I'm capable of and what it takes. And not to listen to well-intended people who might care about you. They cared about me. They knew of my situation. They didn't want to see me fail. But I learned to follow my own gut instinct and not allow anyone to tell me what I wasn't capable of. And that was a huge lesson for me, which opened the door, I think, to entrepreneurialism and having the courage to take those leaps of faith when everyone else is looking at you like you're crazy and what are you doing?
Was that moment of time kind of a springboard for all the other entrepreneurial pursuits that you've done? Because I mean, you've taken the leap, it sounds like, multiple times in your career. And the way I look at it is each time you take one of those leaps, it's almost like you get stronger and it's easier to take the next one, right? I think the first one is like, so someone who's not an entrepreneur, someone who has been in a kind of a traditional 9-to-5, working the corporate ladder, I think the very first time someone says, you know what, I'm going to take this leap and go out and do it by myself, it's the hardest. And then it gets a little bit easier, you know, as you're doing that. Is that a similar experience that you felt?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that one experience left such a mark on me in terms of having the courage to take risk. Because if I didn't take that risk, I would have, number one, I think I would have betrayed myself because I really had a desire to do it. And I felt like I could do it. But had I listened to the voices around me that didn't have that same faith in me at that time, then I would have limited the mom I could have been. I would have limited the opportunity I had. I would have limited how much money I could make. I would have limited the awesome experience of going through what feels like failure and then getting a win. I wouldn't have experienced that, which would have probably kept me in the bucket of staying as an employee where I was taught to feel that was safe. But in fact, it was a cage. It wasn't safe. It didn't allow me to be or do what I wanted to do. So if I wanted more freedom, then I had to jump over here. You know what I mean? And so it taught me a huge lesson, not only in my ability, but what it really takes to start a new endeavor, and not to listen to people, even if they love you and they're well intended. If you've got a gut feeling, if you've got a desire, if you've got a wish, a hope, a dream, whatever you want to call it, you got to just go for it and give it all you got. It taught me that. So that led me into whenever else opportunity presented itself. I had that win, and that win told me I could do it. I could do it. I could do it. As crazy as it may have looked, I had that piece of me that won, so it would stand up and say, no, you can do it. Remember?
Yeah.
Remember
that? Yeah. Yeah, in my career, I've had similar type experiences where anytime that I was about ready to make a substantial leap, career pivot, do something different, I've had people in my life that were very close to me, well-intentioned, trying to, oh, Bob, are you sure? Are you sure this is what you want to do? Oh, you can't do that. And, I've had to... and I've had some good counsel and mentors as well. And so I've done this a number of times to where I know the right counselors and mentors to seek out advice, people who have either walked that path before you and are a little bit further down the road in their career who can give, sage wisdom and advice, versus somebody who is well-intentioned but literally has never done it, and yet they're trying to speak into it. And if I had listened, there's multiple times in my career that if I had listened to well-intentioned individuals who really did care for me, but literally had no clue of all the ins and outs and the subtle nuances of what I was going to try to do, I would have missed my greatest opportunities. And I've actually had conversations with some of those individuals, right? And I feel like, hey, remember when you gave me this advice? And I was like, this is what's going on. And they're like, yeah, I didn't see that. I was like, I know. But I had another mentor who did, right? So it's so important, because everybody who is listening to this podcast, no matter what you do in life, whatever decision you make, you're going to have people who are going to speak into it. Now, look, I'm a huge believer that there's, as the Bible says, a wisdom and a multitude of counselors, right? I never make an important decision without seeking out good counsel, but you got to make sure you're asking the right people.
That's right. And I think, too, in terms of mentorship, like you're saying, my boss at the time, I originally was hired as a staffing agent. And, I think I was making $10 or $11 an hour at the time. And I was probably doing that for about 6 months to a year when my manager left on maternity leave. And before she left, she looked at me and she said, I want you to know I'm not coming back. This is when I first got started with them. And so I had very little experience. I, just because of my childhood and leaving home very young, and school really wasn't my thing. I had to provide for myself very early in life. And so I didn't feel like, I didn't have all the credentials people have, and I didn't go to college, and I didn't do all that stuff. So there was that piece of me that felt inadequate or insecure. And so when my manager at the time was leaving, and she said, I want you to know I'm not coming back, and I'm putting you in as the one I think should take my position. As excited as I was, I looked at her and I said, I don't think I'm the right person. It just came out of my mouth. Like, I don't think I'm it was this fear that came over me because I knew where I had come from. And
you're like, I'm not qualified. I don't have all these other things behind my name that other people would have.
Right.
And so it just came right out of your mouth.
Just came out of my mouth.
Why was she putting you in?
Because she said that she saw something in me and she knew that I could do it. And I don't know what she saw, because at that time I didn't see it. But I just said, Shauna, I really don't think I'm the person, I don't. And she says, I already told, Michael, who was the owner of the company, and he's going to talk to you today. And so she just convinced me to shush and to let the process happen.
You got this, right?
And so he came in to talk to me, and I ended up accepting the position with my heart pounding out of my chest. Like, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to find out I don't know what I'm doing. He's going to, I didn't have a lot of belief in myself. And this is early in my staffing career. Mm-hmm. And so he took me under his wing. And I didn't know about mentorship. I didn't know a lot about a lot. Mm-hmm. And he took this little shy little girl that was afraid to, speak up, that really didn't see a lot in herself, that didn't have a lot of confidence. And he kept telling me what he saw in me. And I had never had someone to do that. And so it started to build my belief in myself. Mm-hmm. And he would take me out on these big meetings, these we'd get in front of investment banking firms, and he'd put on these presentations to land the account. And then one day I'm in the car with him, and he says, "You're up." I said, "What do you mean I'm up?" He's like, "It's your turn. You're presenting today." I wanted to open the door to that car.
And throw up, probably.
I'm like, what are you talking about? No way, I can't do this. And I'm
impromptu presentation.
Oh my gosh, I was like sweating bullets.
Yeah.
But it was the best thing he could have ever done for me, because I landed the account, and he started to just develop me and speak life into me and encourage me and put me in situations that were super uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I started to grow. I started to develop in these areas that I didn't even know existed inside of me. And so I am a super believer in mentorship, even though I wouldn't have known to even call it that back then. Mm-hmm. But he changed my life. He took me from somebody I thought I was, which wasn't very much. I didn't think very much of myself back then. And he developed me into, I believe, gave me the courage to be who I am today, and I'm super grateful to him.
Wow. One of the things that you shared earlier, you mentioned that you felt inadequate when you were getting that opportunity. And I'd like, tell me what you were doing, some of the characteristics or qualities of you that you believe you were displaying that opened up that door for your boss to put you in there. And then your inadequacy is, so many people struggle with that. I mean, I've known top performers, whether it's, star athletes, successful CEOs, and when you kind of talk to them privately, if they open up to you behind closed doors, it'll come out as like, I feel inadequate about this, or I feel, right? Why is it that so many people struggle with that inadequacy? I mean, have you analyzed that at all in terms of maybe yourself, or maybe what you've discovered on your journey? Because I think that you're speaking to something that a lot of people listening, everybody struggles with that. And here you had this inadequacy feeling, right? But you had a mentor and somebody who coached you along and helped you and spoke life into you, and you blossomed into this all-star performer for this company. Tell me a little bit about that journey.
It's a really great question, because if you would have asked me back then, I had no clue. Mm-hmm. But over the years, doing a lot of just personal growth and becoming a sponge and a reader and really wanting to even just understand myself. Mm-hmm. What I've learned about where that inadequacy for me came from was being a child that never felt that no matter what I did, and I love my parents. This is not a blame to them or a dig to them. They're simply a byproduct of their own environment, and I'm mature enough to look at that and know that. But I didn't feel that anything I ever did as a child was good enough, to the point that when I had to leave my home because of religious chaos, there was a piece of me as a child that felt like they were willing to let me go because I wasn't worth loving. So I think we all take stuff from our childhood that there was a little Raquel, there's a little Bob, there's a little Mark, there's a child in us that never fully resolved some of the feelings and the emotional wounds. And so we grow into these adults, but that piece of us, that wound was never healed.
That child is still with us.
That child is still with us. And that child was the piece of me that felt inadequate, that felt unworthy to be loved, that felt unworthy to succeed, that felt stupid because I didn't get the degrees in college and I didn't go. That felt, all those things. And back then I didn't know that. Today I know that just because of all the digging I've done into myself and learning in this area to understand, because that feeling, that emotion will rear its ugly head in other situations. There are triggers that cause these things to rise up in us. So it wasn't just that experience that I had, but through my life, that very same inadequacy, that fear, that feeling of not being good enough continues to rise its ugly head until we actually go in. It's going in, and it's not an easy process. It takes courage to go back into those wounds so that we can heal them, and move forward. But that's where they come from. They're just wounds that we never took the time, but most of the time is because we don't know how. We don't have the tools to be able to deal with those wounds and heal them.
Well, one of the things that you shared last night over dinner was the fact that you really enjoy coaching and mentoring people. And in the years that we've been friends, and I've seen you on stage all across the country, giving presentations. You're a powerful communicator. You're extremely effective. I think and you bring this emotion that a lot of times I think communicators don't want to show the emotion, right? Just as they want to kind of be stoic, and it's just like, hey, let's talk about data. But you allow the emotion of what you're communicating flow from you, and I think you connect with the audience. But you said that this is something that you relish, you absolutely love doing. And do you think that traces all the way back to that very first boss who spoke life into you and kind of helped you? It sounds like that was a pivotal moment in your career that gave you the confidence, that helped, springboard you. And I see you doing that with other people, and you're communicating and you're teaching and so forth. Do you feel that you get joy out of that, and that's why?
Absolutely. I think definitely, because I have been able to overcome a lot of things in my life, and the older I get, understand where they come from and really wrap my head around what happened. What happened to me in my early years? What's happened to me in the time of my life now, and because I have been able to kind of pull myself out of the pit, so to speak. I often would tell my husband, broken knows broken. And when I sit with another woman, or I know.
You can look in their eyes, you can sense it. Yep.
Yes. And a lot of times I'll speak something into that woman's life right then and there, and we might be talking business, but she'll say something and I will shoot something at her, and they'll just break down in tears. And I know I got them, not to make them cry, but because I know that unless someone brought an awareness to me, I could never deal with that specific thing. And so I get such a joy from being able to connect with someone and hit those points that they need to become aware of, so that they can begin to heal in that area. Because if we're blinded to it, then there is no there's no working on it. There's no dealing with it. And so when I see this brokenness in someone, my heart just goes out, and I just want to grab them and just start this journey with them, and give them information that I know is going to make a difference in their life, so that they can come up out of it. And I very much have a passion for that. Well,
I've witnessed you speaking life into people and encouraging folks. And I know that you have impacted hundreds, if not thousands, of folks around the country and on their journey. So I just want to say thank you for being willing to do that. There's a lot of folks who go through challenging times in life, but they kind of keep it. They don't want to talk about it. And I think that's it's sad because I think someone who's gone through something and then learned is in such a better place to be able to help people around them in their life and help others who are just starting on that journey, right? Yeah, I want to come back to you and hear some more about, because I want to learn about you being the number one hair saleswoman for bald guys in Los Angeles. But I want to turn to your husband, Mark, who's been sitting right next to you. And so it's been interesting as we've been, because I just want to ask you a question. So here's Mark. I mean, so for those people who have never seen or met Mark Williams, this guy looks like a bulldog, right? I mean, this guy, it looks like he spends most of his time in the gym. He's completely ripped. He's a San Francisco police officer on the SWAT team. Looks like he could storm the beaches of Normandy at any moment. And he's sitting next to you, Raquel, and the entire time you're talking, the guy is crying like a little baby, and he's over here wiping tears out of his eyes. And I'm like, so Mark, tell me what's going on. You've literally emotions. You still got tears in your eyes. What's going on? Yeah, you've the emotions just coming out.
I was around her, watching her being a single mom, and I grew up in a household where my mom was a single mom. Mm-hmm. So I see the fight in her, and I respect it. But I'm in admiration of her fight. And I mean, I can feel that emotion when she speaks it. So every time, she knows this.
He's a big bear. But he's a big
Yeah.
I just respect that, admire it, and I recognize that she worked so hard to get through her stuff so she can provide for her son.
So you had a front row seat watching this journey.
Yeah,
right?
I came in at a point where I think I met her 6 months after her and her first husband split up, and I got to be around her because she was in Los Angeles, I was in San Francisco, and we were dating, and I would fly down or drive down to see her and watch her be this corporate executive and work hard and
a superwoman,
from working hard and actually getting up early and making breakfast for her son, getting him ready for school, and then going to work, and then coming home after, picking him up, and the whole night I was there and got to see it in little bites of time, and it was just something that was a very, very attractive to me because she was doing it all, and without anything, any interruption. And she was very focused, and I respected that. I could see, it's interesting because you are attracted to what you grew up around, and my mom was the very same way. My mom was a single mom with my sister and I. So, I just admired and respected her fight, her grit, and she was going after it.
How did you support her in those early days?
I wanted to just make sure that she had what she needed to succeed, whatever that was. Maybe, because we talked a lot. We had to, because we were in a relationship long distance, and we would spend a lot of time on the phone, and we would try to see each other as much as we could. Luckily for me, she had ties to the Bay Area. Her family lived in San Bruno, which was close to San Francisco, where I worked. So she would come around and to see her family, and that was the advantage that I had to spend more time with her.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Raquel, how early on in the relationship, how did you say? I just love watching the two of you as a couple. You're a power couple, right? And you just love and support each other and complement each other in so many unique ways. How early in the relationship, what attracted you to Mark, and how were you, kind of supporting him? Because he's got a fairly aggressive career, right? It's very demanding. And you guys were able to not only, but you have a demanding career. He has one. You live in separate cities. How did you guys make this work?
Well, I think, early on, because I met him 6 months after I was going through this divorce. For me, I wasn't as willing as he was in the beginning because I was dealing with a lot of stuff, right? But Mark's love for me was bigger than my junk. And it really was going to take someone like that in my life if it was going to work, because I was the one who could shut you off and shut you out in a heartbeat. You learn to do that as survival, right? Growing up and just going through some stuff, and you kind of learn how to just shut yourself off. And I became really good at it. So I think really Mark brought a softness to me that I didn't know. And it's funny because you're talking about big, strong SWAT cop, guy, but he softened my edges, and it was something that I needed. I needed someone whose love was bigger than my edges, and for me, it kept me going back to him because I could blow people out pretty quickly.
And it's a defense mechanism,
right, and I think he could see past it. And was willing to love me through it. And all honesty, that's, I think, how we ended up together. I mean, that's, yeah.
Well, it's interesting to me that, so here you are, and you've just stated that you learned how to close people off, close doors, shut doors as a defense mechanism. And the guy sitting next to you is a SWAT police officer who's trained to do what? Kick down doors, right?
Yes.
But the way it sounds like the way he kicked down those doors that you were putting up were not the proverbial, foot on a door, but just being present. You said the love, the support. Tell me how he kicked down those, because I would imagine you probably put up some of those doors. How did he kick down those doors and get to you?
Okay, so full disclosure here is I ended up walking away from the relationship. I had moved to the Bay Area. I ended up walking away, and we didn't see each other for a whole year. I wasn't very nice. And I won't go into the whole story here, but a year later, in that year, I had dated a couple of people and so forth. But I never stopped thinking about who Mark was, because there was just something very different about him and me than me with someone else. Like, he, again, brought something out in me that not very many people ever did. And so that whole year went by, but when we reconnected, that the day that I saw him again, it has now been 20 years since that day.
Wow.
And we're going on 18 years married this next month, November.
Wow.
And so, yeah, thank you. So, and I remember him looking at me, and just saying, you trying to get my attention? And we both laughed. And from that day forward, we've been together. So again, I think his love for me was just bigger than my junk. I needed time to process out some of the stuff I was going through, but Mark had a way of making me feel safe, which as a child I didn't feel. He is strong, and he is, in chaos, he's calm. I needed that calmness. He can, the stuff can hit the fan around him, and he gets into a zen, and it's like this. You ever see what's that movie with the guy that?
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
What, Matrix, right?
Yeah,
how everything
bending around the
right.
Yeah.
Well, that's Mark in chaos, where I'm the and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And Mark is the calm. Like, he just kind of. I think that was a great compliment to me. I needed that calmness in my life. I needed the sense of stability. Like, somebody loved me enough to, no matter what the junk was and what the stuff was, that they were going to be solid for me. And I have to say that's what he's been for me. He's been that rock for me.
Wow. Well, it's interesting to process that calmness and that strength and that peace. Relationships need it. Businesses also need it, right? I mean, it just seems like no matter what situation you put yourself in, that type of leadership is needed. And whether it's in like I said, relationships, business, government, leaders rise to the top, and it's you personify that with me, Mark. Because when we've gotten together and we talk, you've shared with me some of the stories that you've had, whether in the prison systems of California or as a police officer in San Francisco. It's just you personify just that cool under pressure guy who rises to the occasion. So it's interesting to see how you've used that in all aspects of your life.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're put in these different environments in whatever career path you choose. And in these environments, I was sharing this last night with you guys, is, there's different ways to do different things, and you watch people that you admire or respect, or, in my world, they were field training officers that you would encounter, and they're there to show you how to, execute on the things that you were taught in the police academy, show you the ropes, so to speak, and you go out on the street and you perform, and then you take different things from different people, things that you like. And they tell you this in the academy. You'll find these different training officers that you'll encounter. And obviously there's certain metrics that you have to meet in order to pass, but there's also things that they're going to do that you may not feel comfortable doing. Obviously, the basics on how you're talking to people, how you address people, those types of things. Everything's always fluid when you're out in the street. And then, you'll take the things that you like, and then you'll leave the things that you don't like, and then you'll build your own style. That's the point. But I find that, for everybody, we've had these examples in front of us, like Raquel said, since we were kids. And we have these exposures, and they mark us, and they have an experience. You've had an experience with different people, and through your journey, you recognize that, looking back on those things that were the markers in the road, so to speak. And these were big points of where you could either go left, go right, or go backwards out of fear. But, I tend to move forward because I want to see what's next for me. And as I started to do that, I started to develop a kinship to learning that from other people. And being around, my mom was a great example because she worked in a doctor's office. She was the greeter, so to speak. And so she'd come in, and you as a kid, I got to spend time in her office after school. We'd go there. My sister and I'd have to go there and wait for her to get off work. And so we'd sit there, and she would example that. And she treated everybody the same. And in San Francisco, it's such a melting pot. And she didn't speak Russian. She didn't speak Taiwanese. She didn't speak Chinese. She didn't, And so trying to communicate, not just through language, voice flexion, right? Command presence, so to speak, how they address people, and being soft, having those soft skills. I learned a lot of soft skills from my mom. And so that really worked well for me when I hit the streets. Didn't know it, that I was exempling that as well. But then to try to get to the point of interviewing different people, whether it be, you're on the scene of an accident, a car accident, or if you're trying to identify if a crime has been committed. So all these different ways to address people. I think we have the ability. I think people limit themselves when they go out there and talk to people. I think they overthink it. Bottom line.
Speak into the people skills that you learned and leveraged, and how important that was in your journey as on the police force. Because you're highlighting a little bit of that last night, whether it's in the prison system or whether it was on the street as a detective, investigator. But, because it seems like there's also parallels to how important, people skills are everything, right? They say business is relationships. And you've been able to take, I think, a lot of that insight and experience that you have learned and leveraged as a law enforcement officer also into the business world. Can you share some of those things that you've learned and the parallels that you see between your police work and also as an entrepreneur? Because you're an entrepreneur as well.
Absolutely. It's interesting because the early time in my career, you would try things to try to elicit a response because you wanted people to comply. So when I worked in the jails, that was my first exposure, working in the criminal element at a concentrated level. So we're working around criminals that are classified as, there's some of them are deemed, early, new kind of criminal type of mindsets. And then there's the ones that are very senior criminals that are you're coming into their environments because they're in jail and they're waiting their trials and what their next steps are in the justice system. And you're around them and you're talking to them and you're learning from them how they manipulate, how they talk to you, and the things that they want. And so, because you're their only one of the only lines of communication for things that they need. And so you learn early on who's using you, their type of verbiage, how their actions are. So you get a really good education working in the system there on the concentrated levels of the criminal element, so to speak. And, everything from people that were career criminals that were robbers, burglars, you name it.
What's a typical manipulation they're trying to pull on an officer in a correctional facility?
Oh gosh, getting stuff. Having their family. Hey, my cousin's going to bring something for me on visiting day. Do you mind bringing it back to me? That's a huge no-no, right? Because what are they going to do? They're going to conceal something in there that's illegal, and it's been proven time and time. I mean, you learn that early on, but sometimes they want to see if you're going to do it. They're testing your mental capacity, but also, will you fall prey to their
So the first
schemes?
one may be innocuous, right? It may be just like, oh, it's a comb or it's a box of tissues or something. There's nothing. They just want to see if, okay, can I get this guy
Absolutely.
to do what I need him to do? Because I know then down the line I'll get him to do something else.
Yeah, so there's a lot of reverse psychology that goes on there. There's a lot of, they build relationships in there, and sometimes try to influence their personality over yours. So you learn that early on, and it really worked well for me when I transitioned out of working in the jail system onto the street, because then I got to see their methods of operations and how their mindsets were about their type of style of criminal element, because everybody has a style. Some use it for building relationships for building business, and some use it for building relationships to execute their criminal element. So it was interesting to see that and experience that, and so that became a kind of something that I could use to go ahead and further how to protect those people on the street when I got on the street, and to see what they were doing and how they were doing it, and kind of having an idea. Okay, I think I know who that person might be, or that I remember listening to their conversations in jail, because that's what they do.
They talk.
So it's quite interesting.
So, you have a really interesting career right now as you've transitioned out of full-time law enforcement in San Francisco, and you are, I guess, protective service, bodyguard. I won't go into all the details, but for our listeners, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, home to some of the wealthiest and most prominent business tycoons of our generation. So I'll just let you think about who some of those people may be, and those are the types of people that Mark is interfacing with on a fairly regular basis and protecting and serving. So I won't ask you to disclose confidential information, which you can't do, but I've heard some stories of the folks that you're working with and protecting, and tell me about your transition from full-time law enforcement into this new career as an entrepreneur, serving in that capacity. What are some of the things maybe that you're learning or that you're seeing as you serve these high net worth individuals, very prominent business leaders? I mean, we were talking a little bit about it last night. Just tease out, what are some of the things that you see and how they organize and live their life, or the things that they're doing that enable them to be successful, that maybe a young entrepreneur, a new entrepreneur could be putting in place in their life today?
That's a great question. One of the things right away that, as you're asking me that question, that stuck out to me is that their ability to stay focused, their ability to look at these opportunities, because a lot of times things don't go their way. And they've learned to have that emotional control and think things through before making a response. A lot of times, I'll be in a car, I'll either driving with them or as a support element in the car, and something doesn't go well or go their way, and they think about, okay, so what are the options? And then they're trying to identify and problem solve. They do a really good job of problem solving, thinking about different things, and then they'll reach out to maybe some of their co-partners and kind of get a good gauge on what the next step should be. But I never really see them get frazzled, and I think it's because we talk about the inoculation. They've done this so much, and they've failed early on. I mean, a lot of them, they still fail, but there's a process that they recognize as an opportunity when these things happen, not to give up the ship, but to go, okay, what can we do next to right this, to make this, work in a situation where some people might not see that and then go throw their hands up and go, this isn't working, I'm out. No, they don't do that, because they have millions and millions of dollars on the table.
Hundreds of millions.
Yeah, right. So it's interesting to be around that, but it also helps me appreciate, what we're doing here, knowing we're in the right place at the right time with what we're doing. I'm seeing such a big correlation. I just had the experience of being at a big conference at Moscone Center where this was, all these high-tech companies and security clouds and all this stuff that I didn't understand initially. And then I was learning all this stuff on the fly. And then I'm looking at what we're doing here in Bonvera going, wow, that is what they're doing. And they're seeing a vision of where they're going with this. And then the correlation of what we're doing in Bonvera and where we're going here, it's like, holy moly, like this, like they have no idea that we exist yet. But when we cross connect, boy, it's going to be huge. It's going to be a world impact.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I want to pivot back to your wife, and I want to ask Raquel, tell me a little bit about you being the top saleswoman in Los Angeles for hair for bald guys. I still kind of cackle when tell me, how did you fall into this line of work? And, what did you learn? I mean, because at one point you're if memory serves me correctly, you were living in San Francisco, you're working in LA, and you're like, I can't continue to make this commute. And you told them you're going to quit. And you're like, no, we'll do whatever we have to do so that you can still be down here and continue to sell for us. Tell us a little bit about why did you enjoy that job, and what did you learn from that experience?
So actually, when I left Los Angeles and I came up to the Bay Area to be with Mark, I left the staffing industry at that point. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And there was a position available for a medical consultant. I wasn't sure what that all meant. I didn't know who it was for. It just looked like it's sales. I can do it, right? So I go and apply for the position and I find out what it's for. And I'm like, well, this is a little different. But I went for it. That's just kind of my personality. The pay looked looked good. And I thought, I could do this. Okay. So originally I started in San Jose with the company, and it was a full-time position. And my daughter at the time was very little. So I started selling a lot of hair, and it was really funny. I mean,
this was Hair Club for Men. Is that
yes,
what I understand?
Yes.
Okay. And how do you sell hair? Out of curiosity, what do you do? Some guy comes in, he's bald, and you're like, hey, I can put hair on your head. Is it a cream? I mean,
no, it's a surgery.
Okay.
So they actually remove a piece from the back of the guy's head. And then they use those follicles, they sew them up in the back, and then they use those hair follicles and implant them on top.
Okay.
So it's an actual medical procedure. Okay. So I learned very quickly, sales is fun for me, and it really is just relationship. Yeah. And so problem solving. I mean, these guys come in, they want hair, okay? They want hair, and they don't want to feel humiliated or embarrassed. And so I had a way of just talking to these guys, being very honest with them. One thing I learned early on is just transparency. I don't feel like tiptoeing around any situation helps anyone. Doesn't help you, doesn't help me. It's just, how do I communicate that without being offensive?
Right.
And so I learned how to communicate yet be very honest. And these guys would come in, I would just speak to them very matter of fact. Some guys would come in. I have to tell you this one story because I to this day I giggle at it. But you know how some guys will grow out just the front piece of their hair super long and comb it back,
okay,
right? It's like it's a comb over.
Yeah, right.
So this one gentleman comes in and he's sitting in front of me and he's got this mani comb over going on, and he says, "Well, Raquel, I'm not doing too bad. I think I'm okay." And I had a pen because I would take notes. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay. And I just kind of looked at them. And, we would evaluate their scalp and tell them how much we thought they would need and so forth. I said, you mind if I take a look? And I got up and I had the pen in my hand. I was so bad. And I took the pen and I literally placed it right under the hair and I flipped it.
And all this hair comes flying forward. He's just completely bald.
Yes. Like, and I said, the poor guy, and I was like, actually,
Yeah, let's reevaluate this.
and I very calmly told him my observation of the situation, and he ended up buying a full pop surgery from me that day.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's interesting. New information. Be like, let's reevaluate this. So I'm the expert. I'll tell you if you're doing well or not. You're not doing so great.
Yeah, exactly. Poor guy. I blew his world, but hopefully he was happy with the surgery.
I'm sure he was. So what did you learn? Out of that experience? But it sounds like transparency, just being matter of fact. I mean, you're dealing with that's a situation where there's a level of maybe embarrassment or anxiety, and it sounds like you just kind of naturally put people at ease. We're just able to talk with them and walk them through the process and solve their problems, right?
Yes. They were coming there for a solution. And really, I just feel like that's what sales is. You help people find a solution for if they're interested in a service or a product or whatever it is for a specific reason. I really learned a lot. I learned how to be able to speak honestly to people in a very sensitive area, because it was a sensitive area for them. These are guys' egos, which, guys' egos are huge.
Yeah. You're nudging your husband right now.
And, but in a way that I wasn't disrespecting them. I was coming from a sincere place of, here, I can help you, and let me show you how. And I just learned how to have those conversations. I was very real with people. I've always been very real with people, and I think that has been to my benefit in anything I've ever done, in any sales situation, is I've learned to connect with people. I learned to just get real with them and not be fake or not just try to sell you. I just talk to you and I'm real with you. And it has worked for me. It has worked for me because I don't feel like I don't ever do anything that I think is going to hurt someone. If you're coming to me and there's something that you're wanting, then I'm gonna help you accomplish that, no matter what field it's in, no matter what it is that we're doing. And I think people trust me, and that has served me. And so my reputation in terms of being honest is really big to me, because I think if you ever lose that, you lose credibility. People can sense a snake. They can sense when you're trying to get something from them. And I learned not to operate that way. I learned to just connect with people. So I think that's the key.
What you're highlighting something that I appreciate in a sales environment. I think that one of the reasons why a lot of times sales roles can sometimes be seen negative is because people have had that experience with that sales rep for XYZ company that, it's the hardcore pressure sale, and you walk into a showroom somewhere or you walk in a place of business and you're being sold. They've got the script they're running through. It's pressure, pressure, pressure. And you're just like, you're not talking to me like a real human being. You're not trying to solve any problems. I remember one time I was, the last car I was purchasing, I had walked into a showroom and I was looking at a particular vehicle, and the representative called me back. It was at the end of the month. And his sales pitch to me was, Bob, I really need you to come in. This was like 8 o'clock at night. They're about ready to close. I really need you to come in. Will you come in and buy that car? I'm trying to hit my quota.
Wow.
And I really need to hit this quota this month. I know you're on the verge of purchasing this vehicle. Come on in and we'll work out a deal. But I need to hit my quota. I'm thinking to myself, this guy is an absolute idiot.
Yeah.
He is 100% all about him. I made sure, number one, not to buy the vehicle from him, and also not to buy the vehicle from that dealership. I was like, I will not do business, because it was all about him, right? But we've all had those types of experiences where you have a negative experience with someone who's trying to sell you. And what I sense from you and your career, whether the various different backgrounds and companies that you've been working with, is that you have a very genuine approach to people. It's relationship first, it's trust, it's transparency. All these keywords that you're referencing are the things that I look for when whether I'm going in with my wife to buy furniture, whether I'm going to go get a vehicle. I want someone to treat me like a human being and to have a relationship with me and to ask some probing questions. And what are you looking for? How can I solve it? Because you're right. I have a problem, I'm looking for a solution.
That's right.
And I just want someone to treat me like a human being. Let's have a conversation. But I hate it when someone's got this like rote script and you can just tell that they're going down this, bullet point list and be like, try to force me into what they want.
Right.
So, and what advice would you give then for a entrepreneur who's making the leap for the very first time? Maybe someone like yourself, way back in the day. Remember, you said that you were wanting to get out of that traditional 9-to-5 job. You wanted to have some flexibility. You wanted to have a different income opportunities. So, someone who's listening to the podcast, about ready to make that leap, and so you're 20 years ahead of them, having multiple entrepreneurial experiences. You've mentioned a couple of key things: trust, transparency, being genuine, having a real relationship, understanding what a person's problems are, what type of solution they're looking for. What else? What other key things that you would want to mention to this young? Let's pretend you're mentoring yourself back there at the age of 23, 24. What would you tell the 23, 24-year-old you to encourage you on that journey? Here's a tip that you absolutely need to know.
I would probably tell myself to not shy away from what feels uncomfortable, because I feel like the more uncomfortable the situation, as in the case where I was asked to present and I felt I was totally not ready, and I was very uncomfortable, but it was one of the best learning experiences for me. So as opportunities arise, I would say, don't shy away from what scares you. I often tell my daughter and our children, you need to lean into the things that make you uncomfortable, because the biggest growth comes from those situations. So I would also say, learn to listen. I think a lot of times what salespeople tend to do is they want to rattle and they want to talk way too much, and no one likes to feel like they're being sold. You need to learn to listen. I would tell myself, learn to listen and really hear what the other person is saying, so that when you open your mouth, you are speaking to them. You're not speaking to your agenda.
Oh, that is gold. Absolute gold. Can I ask you guys a couple of rapid fire questions?
Sure.
All right. What books are you currently reading at the moment? Or a book that that you've read recently that's really impacting your life?
Right now I am devouring books on health. That's kind of been my thing currently, just because of some of my own health challenges and things that I have dealt with. I'm learning about energy in the body, which I think is extremely fascinating, and how energy works.
Oh, wow.
And the power of the subconscious mind, which is a book that I just read that I think is phenomenal. So I'm really learning how the body and the mind interact, and how our subconscious and our thoughts, negative thoughts, worry, fear. The Bible, there's a scripture that says, think upon these things that are good and true and pure. And I never understood the why to that. And I'm learning the why to that, because every thought carries an energetic frequency, and that energy then impacts every organ in our body. And I'm super fascinated by this and learning the balance between how we think. It also says, as a man thinks, so is he, right? And again, that is not just some cute little fable. That is, as we think, so are we. And our body is literally a product of our thoughts and emotions that we carry. And so I am really diving into this information and learning and applying it in my life, and really seeing some awesome changes right now. So that's kind of my thing right now.
That is really interesting. So it's not just a neat saying, but there's science behind it.
Yes.
That is awesome.
So learning these scriptures early on, and then now learning the science behind it is blowing my mind. Like being able to connect the two and see how literally our thoughts and our words and our emotions impact our health and every organ in us has been fascinating.
We're going to need to have you back on the podcast as you do some more of that research and study, and then we can kind of tease all that out, because we could have an entire show just on that. What are some of your pet peeves?
Wow. Some of my pet peeves.
It's a hard pivot.
Yeah, that really is.
I can answer that for her.
Okay, yeah. I want to know some of your pet peeves too.
Some of my pet peeves. Whew. I guess I have a lot of things that really bother me. I think one of my pet. I was just going to say that. I think one of my pet peeves are people that aren't genuine, that are so insecure that the only way they feel better about themselves is to put you down or to speak poorly about you. I know where it comes from. I've done enough reading to know that's just a broken person, but I still have a hard time with it sometimes. I need to grow. I need to grow because I do take things personally sometimes when people I have some people currently in my life like that. And I think sometimes God puts people in our lives because it's just another area of growth that we need to attend to. And I'm learning how not to take things so personally and recognize when someone is just, in fact, hurt or broken themselves and think loving thoughts towards that person instead of taking it on and thinking not so nice thoughts.
Yeah. As you were just saying earlier, right? Your thoughts that have dictate so much.
That's right.
Mark, how about you? Police officer, pet peeves. People driving in the slow lane?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my biggest pet peeves is, people not following through what they said they were going to do, and like I said, I'm not perfect at that, but when we make a commitment to one another or we say we're going to be somewhere at a certain time or whatever it is that we're participating in, right? We haven't, there's something that we want to accomplish together or something that we need to get together to do. And we agree on a time and a place or whatever the mission is. And we're going to meet there and then either something pops up again. And I get that. Right. But at the same time, hey, this was something that's very important. We need to follow through on this, and lack of follow through.
Well, it's that military bearing that has been drilled into me and you, right?
Yeah, it is. It's hard to break. Now, granted, there are things happen. Life happens all the time, but to stay, one of the things that we've been trained about is have a plan, but stay flexible in the plan because guess what? The plan will change. And that's another thing that a lot of takeaways I learned from, I like to stay open to learn from other people. I think that's one of the biggest things I think people can benefit from if they take the time to seek and understand other people and listen, like my wife just mentioned, listen, and then there's probably something that you can learn. We can learn from everybody, For
sure.
So,
speaking of learning, what books are you reading?
Oh man, one of the books I shared last night at the RTE, Attitude is Everything, Jeff Keller. That was I hadn't read that book in a long time, and going through it again at this point in my career and my life and what we're doing as entrepreneurs, I think it's a big eye-opener of awareness for individuals to dig into, to see again, because that is the mission, that's the journey, is to see how you personally tick and to see how you can bring out the best in you by identifying who you are. I mean, that's really the journey and the goal. So that book does a good job of, through his experience, and what he's gone through and kind of identified different areas that you can work on and being consistent, right? Because as we walk through this journey, there's much more. So that's one book, and then I have another book that I'm looking at in my industry too, of as I participate in executive protection and working with high net worth individuals and how their lives are structured, and kind of just how do I provide more solution, bring value to the teams as I start to jump on board with these guys. I've done all these different one-offs for all these dignitaries from around the world. They come in and I have the opportunity to work around them. So this is my opportunity to learn and then provide value to be on their team and what I can learn. So that's been very fascinating. So I like to read a lot about the guys I come across. So
I bet
these guys that I'm working with, and what makes them tick? Who are they? And then the ones that have the books that they've written, there's one particular individual that I think is going to go, I think is going to be a really good parallel to where we're going. And this gentleman has been 40 years in the tech world. And, he's now he was CEO of 2019, and, he's doing big things, and he's a Christian devout man. And, he's making things happen, and I want to learn more about him and what makes him tick, and really learn from the challenges that he's had, because I think that's where the opportunity to grow lies, and we talked about failing forward and, those types of things. I think those are the books that I'm attracted to now. And there's some other books that I'm looking at as far as on the spiritual side too. So I kind of look at it as a 3-prong event, things that are current that I need to know now. And I ask, like I shared last night about things that I'm about to read or things that I feel that are going to be, that I'm attracted to, so I can be in the right place at the right time, kind of developing myself with those, staying open.
As a police officer, what's your favorite concealed carry weapon?
Oh, that's a good one. The industry standard today, and I ask a lot of guys what they carry, the industry standard right now, for those that, and everybody has their personal choice or favorite weapon. So the Glock 19, because it's concealed, very concealable. But I have everybody from,
Is that a 9mm or 4?
It's a 9mm. Yeah. So it's a 9mm. It's very compact, and that's really what we look at in the concealment world. But there's everything from the new SIG 320 and everything, anybody can, and everybody has their own favorite, whether it be a Kimber or a Browning.
That's what I carry. I carry a Kimber Ultra Carry 45.
There you go,
but
right?
It's big and bulky. So during the summertime, it's hard for me to kind of somewhat conceal it. And it is a little bit heavier, but I'll tell you, the one I absolutely love, I can put it in my back pocket. Looks like a wallet. Is my SIG. It's a 380.
65.
It's the 380. What is it? I forget the number on it, but it's a SIG, and the caliber is a 380, and it's tiny. I can put it in the front pocket, back pocket, everywhere I go. I've got it. I love it.
So I continue to train. There's a company that I work around, and I continue to have continuous training in that field too. So I work with these guys, and they talk about mindset. We talk about how we carry concealed and the mindset of that, and if we had to respond, what are the things that we're looking for in order to perform properly, so that way we all come out safe, and having staying in that getting trigger time, so that way we can stay proficient in our field and not be lackadaisical, because that's one of the things that I always tell my guys, if you stay ready, then you don't have to get ready.
That's right.
And so I think that translates over into business too, as we start to develop our mindsets behind, the next project, the next goal. And what we're doing is if we map out a strategy, and stay flexible there, and like you guys mentioned earlier, getting that mentorship, that wise counsel around it, so that way we can, be more focused and get to where we want to go together.
No matter what career field that I have studied or witnessed someone who has been extremely successful, I don't think that in my career, I've come across anyone, military, law enforcement, business, medical, you name the career field, that has risen to the top of that career field, where they have not had a plethora of coaches and mentors who have helped them along the way. I think this whole mythology of this American self-made man or self-made woman, they kind of do it all by themselves, pulled themselves up by the bootstraps. I mean, it's just a complete and total myth. And Raquel, so you highlighted that about how important that early mentor and coach was for you, and it kind of a springboard. And Mark, I know that you and I've talked, and you've talked about the folks in your life who have been mentors, but that's one of the things that I would encourage folks. No matter what you're trying to do to be successful, find somebody who is 5, 10, 15 years ahead of you, who has fruit on the tree, who's been successful. Seek guidance and counsel from them, right? And we were talking earlier in the show about not taking guidance from people who don't have the results that you want. I mean, they're trying to help you. They're well-intentioned. Right. It's well-intentioned advice, but I'm not going to ask my pastor about if I have some type of heart condition or medical condition. Hey, my pastor's probably a great guy, loves me, right? Yeah. But he's not an expert in open heart surgery. If that's what I'm, so you got to go to the right source to get the right mentorship, the right coaching. So I'm glad you highlighted that once again. What's an exotic place and some place on your bucket list? We were talking about this a little bit last night of all the places that we want to go and some of the epic trips that we want to do. But what's on your bucket list as a couple of something that you'd like to do, an exotic location to go visit?
I was kind of doing a little bit of research on some people, and they were in Thailand and they were in Phuket, and I was like, that looks like a good place to be. It's somewhere obviously tropical, warm, and just you can connect from all of the the craziness that we have around in our daily lives, from electronics and the hustle bus of the daily grind, so to speak. So I'd like to check that out. I think I know my wife has some stuff on her list. I know I want to take her to Europe again for sure. We talked about that last night as well. I think that would be fun.
There's so many places I'd like to visit, but I have Europe and Spain and Italy definitely on my brain. That has I've wanted to go there for a very long time. So, and I don't just want to go for a week, at least a month. Yeah. I want to go. I want to walk away knowing it. Yeah. But Thailand, we've seen some beautiful beaches. There's a place where I want to say, I don't know if it was I'm having a brain moment here, but it was beautiful with the huts on the water, and you and I were talking about it, like literally out on the water where these little
Bora Bora has
Bora Bora. That's what it is.
Bora Bora has spots like that. Yeah. So we want to just take that adventure together. I think one of the things we talked about last night too is being able to get away, but being around people that you connect with. And
sure.
Like at dinners and gatherings, it's like it's really nice. It's not just the food and the ambiance, but it's also the company, and those
Although
experiences.
I don't want to take a trip like that with a bunch of company. I'm cool with my husband and my my kids.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I want to take advantage of quiet time together with my wife. But this journey was meant to create these type of memories. We talked about that as well, and so the more memories, the more we get to expand. Is really how it works.
I'm the same way. I love traveling with my wife or my kids where I can experience that with them, and there's nothing that compares to that. That's the apex for me.
Right.
But moving on down, if I had an opportunity to go experience some incredible place on the globe, and I was by myself, I don't get near the enjoyment if I'm by myself as when I'm with a group of friends that where we're enjoying it together. And as you said, whether it's the food, it's the culture, it's the diversity, it's the exploring something, doing something new for the very first time with people that you love and you care about. There's just something extra about that experience.
Agreed.
And so I love being able to travel with friends, and it was great being able to kind of do some dream building with you guys last night and talk about the places that we want to go see and the things that we want to do. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're excited.
As we close up, any productivity hacks that you guys have that you use on a daily basis, or things that you find to be helpful for you as in your entrepreneurial journey?
For me, what I have learned is the most important thing is that I start my day right. Mm-hmm. A lot of people I think don't understand this concept, but I have learned that if I just jump out of bed and dive into my day, I have more things go wrong that I feel out of control. But when I start my day and with some quiet time and do some praying and meditation and just center myself and kind of see my day, I think it's important to see your day and how you want it to roll out, and then just get some quiet time and allow yourself to be led. I mean, that's just what I believe. And when I do that, my day is so much better. Mm-hmm. So I think in terms of productivity, sometimes we want to force the issue instead of doing what I call inspired action. I think inspired action is always going to be much more productive than anything we force. And
reactive.
So, or reactive, right? So for me, I got to start my day right. When I start my day right, everything flows better. When I just get up and it's like, I got to go kind of attitude, and I got to go this, I feel like I'm forcing my day, and it never tends to go right.
That's great insight.
Yeah, for me, in addition to what she just shared, I always like to pre-plan my day, but have a mindset that, and I get excited about my next days because I know I'm going to be able to do something that's different than the day that just happened. So I have an expectancy, number one, of there's going to be something I'm going to be participating in because I know my agenda, I know where I'm going, I know what I'm going to be doing, but there's going to be some excitement along the way. And have that expectancy of that excitement, but just know that no matter what happens, right? We talked about the two things that we can control, our attitude and our effort, right?
Love that.
And so as we move through the agenda of our day, and if we pre-plan that and we have all these things like I do too, before my feet hit the carpet, I'm in prayer and meditation before my feet hit the carpet, because I know, to have thankfulness and gratitude on my mind and in my being before I get up. So then that way I know I'm doing the right things for the right reasons. And then as I move through the points of interest throughout the day, if things don't go well, or I got to push this meeting back, or I'm getting this new client, or whatever's happening, you know what? It's okay. We're going to make it through there. I'm controlling my attitude, right? I'm being disciplined enough to know that, this is happening for a reason. I'm excited, and we don't know what this journey is going to look like, meeting these new people or whatever, if I have to augment or whatever that looks like. But yeah, just staying prepared and just having fun with it and staying open. Yeah. Enjoying the journey.
Well, they've taught you well over your years of law enforcement and police work to be prepared. Yeah, I know you're prepared for everything. And Raquel, one of the things that I really appreciate about you is anytime we talk, it's obvious that you live your life with intentional design, and that you spend a great deal of time in introspection. There's a lot of people, I think, that live life and they don't take the time to dig deep beneath the layers and analyze deeply their life. And you strike me as a woman who is constantly in deep thought and introspection of self-improvement and getting better and helping others. It's just a great quality about you. And I think that's one of the reasons why you're a powerful communicator and just a great mentor and coach for folks in your life. I just want to say thank you both for being on this podcast. I've had a wonderful time chatting with you today and asking you questions. I've learned a ton, and I know that our audience is going to really enjoy all the nuggets of wisdom that have been teased out, and we're going to put a whole bunch of stuff, the books that we've recommended and that you guys have been talking about, that'll be in the show notes. But as we sign off here, do you have any parting words for the audience before we depart?
You know what? I would just say, live your best life. We don't know how long we're here for, and life is way too short for us to settle for a life that we don't want. And the only way to live your best life is to take the time to invest in yourself, which means to invest in your thinking and to spend time thinking, like you said, right? We want to be able to live life and not allow life to live us. And that's been one of the greatest lessons that I've learned.
Wow. Well said. Yeah.
I would also say, if there's things that you're holding back to do, don't wait, go for it, take the leap, go after what you want, because you never know what's on the other side of that uncomfortableness feeling like Raquel talked about earlier, because that's one of the things that, we've taught and, in the military and the law enforcement is like, no risk, no reward. And so, we hear it, we see it, we read it, but you know what? You have to experience. And if that's uncomfortable for you, then you got to see what's on the other side, because that's where your growth lies. And there's opportunity there. So every day is an opportunity, guys. That's the goal.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and for our audience listening in today on this episode of The Leap. I know that you have taken some great notes and had some incredible nuggets of wisdom shared with you. If you are enjoying this podcast, we'd ask that you would share it with friends and family. Definitely check out the show notes. If you've got somebody that you would like us to interview in the near future, don't hesitate to send an email to our staff, and we will work that person into the schedule if we can. Until next time, live your best life, as Raquel has just said. Be bold, take those leaps, enjoy the journey, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Taking the Leap podcast with your host, Bob Dickey. You can keep up with the latest on the podcast at www.takingtheleappodcast.com and bonvera.rocks. You can also find the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever fine podcasts are distributed. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Taking the Leap.